Could you all please stop fainting? This is getting ridiculous, Zephyr Kane muttered, watching as yet another group of alien scientists crumpled to the floor of the testing chamber. The human weapons tester stood in the middle of the smoking remains of what was supposed to be the Galactic Defense Coalition's newest devastating weapon, casually brushing some debris off their reinforced testing suit. Medical team to testing chamber 7. Again, the AI announcement system chimed, somehow managing to sound both bored and exasperated. Bringing smelling salts. Again. Zephyr couldn't help but chuckle as they watched the now familiar sight of the medical team, all wearing what they called human-proof protective gear, scuttling into the chamber like a group of particularly nervous crabs. The team had gotten so used to these incidents that they'd installed anti-gravity stretchers in every testing room and had smelling salts dispensers built into the walls. Look, Zephyr addressed the slowly recovering chief weapons designer, Dr. Xylophone, yes. That was actually his name, apparently. It was quite dignified in his species. I'm not trying to be difficult here, but you advertised this as a reality-shredding quantum devastator. All it did was make my left arm tingle a bit. Kind of reminded me of that time I fell asleep on it wrong. Dr. Xylophone's crystalline form shimmered in what Zephyr had learned to recognize as extreme distress. But the calculations, the energy output should have, it was supposed to, vaporize a small moon. Zephyr finished, trying not to roll their eyes. Yeah, I read the specs. Look, what if we tried doubling the quantum flux? Maybe add some antimatter to the mix. Ooh, and we could. The sound of 3 more bodies hitting the floor interrupted their suggestion. Zephyr looked around to see the recently recovered scientists had fainted again. Oh, come on. I hadn't even gotten to the good part about the dimensional rifts. From the observation deck above, Commander Vrax, a towering arachnid-like being who headed the facility, clicked their mandibles in what might have been amusement. Kane, perhaps we should schedule the rest of this discussion for tomorrow, after we've restocked our supply of smelling salts. Fine, Zephyr sighed, stepping over the unconscious forms of their colleagues. But I'm submitting my modification proposals tonight, and this time I'm not letting anyone talk me out of the plasma-enhanced fusion core. As they walked out, they could hear the medical team behind them discussing the installation of yet another fainting couch. That would make 17 this month alone. At this rate, the testing facility was starting to look like a Victorian parlor. Note to self. Zephyr muttered into their personal recorder, suggest reinforced padding for the fainting couches. Last week's antimatter pistol test proved the current ones aren't rated for multiple simultaneous faintings. Also, remember to requisition more coffee. If they're going to keep bringing weapons that barely qualify as massage devices, I'm going to need the caffeine. Behind them, the facility's AI began updating the day's testing schedule, adding a new item: 0900 hours routine weapon test, 0901 hours medical emergency response, 0905 hours requisition order for more smelling salts. Just another day as the galaxy's only human weapons tester. 6 months earlier. Absolutely not. Commander Vrax's mandibles clicked furiously. We cannot allow a Class 4 fragile species to test our weaponry. It would be unconscionable. Zephyr sat in the ridiculously oversized chair clearly designed for beings much larger than humans, trying not to laugh at being classified as fragile. After all, they'd just walked through the space station's lethal radiation section without even noticing it was active. With all due respect, Zephyr managed, keeping their voice steady. I think there's been a misunderstanding about humans. Indeed, there has been. Dr. Xylophone chimed in, his crystalline form vibrating with concern. We've studied your species extensively. No natural armor, no backup organs. Well, actually, we do have 2 kidneys, only 1 heart, no protective exoskeleton, and your bones are filled with holes. That's just marrow. You're practically made of glass. The crystalline scientist was practically tinkling with distress. We cannot in good conscience. How about a demonstration? Zephyr interrupted, tired of being treated like a porcelain doll. The entire Galactic Defense Council hiring board stared at them in horror. Out of the question, Professor Photon, a being made purely of light and contained in an environmental suit, flickered anxiously. The insurance paperwork alone. Let me rephrase. Zephyr stood up, grinning. I'm going to demonstrate. Right now. Bring out your deadliest small arms weapon. The room erupted in chaos. 3 council members immediately fainted. Zephyr was starting to see a pattern. 2 tried to call security, and 1 attempted to wrap Zephyr in protective bubble wrap that seemed to materialize from nowhere. Stop! Commander Vrax's voice boomed, Everyone froze, including the council members still clutching the bubble wrap. If the human insists on this suicide mission, we shall document it properly. For their next of kin. 20 minutes later, Zephyr stood in testing chamber 3. Facing what the aliens called the molecular devastator, the weapon looked like a cross between a laser rifle and a disco ball, which didn't exactly inspire confidence in its deadliness. Last chance to reconsider. Dr. Xylophone called from behind a fortress of protective barriers. This weapon has been known to reduce Creelian battle tanks to their constituent atoms. Just shoot me already, Zephyr called back, spreading their arms wide. The weapon powered up with a sound remarkably similar to a purring cat. The beam hit Zephyr square in the chest, and... oh wow, Zephyr rolled their shoulders. That's actually great for that knot I've had in my back. Mind hitting me again? Little to the left this time. The silence that followed was deafening. Through the observation window, Zephyr could see Dr. Xylophone's crystalline form had gone completely transparent, apparently his species' version of fainting. Commander Vrax's mandibles were hanging slack, and Professor Photon had dimmed to a barely visible nightlight. What did you feel?" Professor Photon finally managed to ask, their voice barely a whisper. "Kind of like one of those massage guns we have back on Earth. You know, the ones athletes use? Actually, this is better, really gets deep into the muscle tissue. You guys should market this as a therapeutic device." The remaining conscious council members huddled together, whispering frantically. Zephyr caught phrases like impossible, completely rewrite the safety protocols, and what do you mean humans use pain relief devices stronger than our weapons? Finally, Commander Vrax approached the chamber's intercom. "Mr. Kane, would you be interested in a full-time position? Only if you promise to let me help upgrade your weapons." Because honestly, Zephyr gestured at the still humming molecular devastator, "this is kind of embarrassing. I've got a hand mixer back home that puts out more energy." That comment caused 2 more council members to faint. "I'll take that as a yes," Zephyr grinned, already making mental notes about power amplification possibilities. "Oh, and you might want to install some cushions around here. I have a feeling people are going to be fainting a lot." Commander Vrax looked at the unconscious council members, then back at the human who'd just tanked their deadliest weapon and asked for a back rub setting. "Welcome aboard," the commander clicked wearily. "I'll have maintenance begin installing fainting couches immediately, and perhaps reinforce the testing chamber walls." Great, Zephyr beamed. "Now, about that antimatter integration I was thinking about." The sound of multiple bodies hitting the floor echoed through the chamber once again. "We're going to need more smelling salts," Zephyr muttered, watching the medical team rush in. "A lot more smelling salts. Present day." "The planet Cracker Mark V, Dr. Xylophone announced proudly, his crystalline form gleaming under the reinforced testing chamber lights. "Our most powerful weapon yet." Zephyr stared at what looked like an oversized lava lamp attached to a pool noodle. "Aha. And those rubber ducky stickers on the side. Safety regulations require cheerful warnings for Class X weapons," Commander Vrax explained from behind 3 feet of blast shielding. "The ducks indicate extreme planetary destruction risk." "Of course they do," Zephyr muttered, hefting the weapon. "And the rainbow unicorn sticker. That's for reality fabric disruption hazard," the medical team leader called out from their newly installed bunker, complete with fainting couch dispenser and automated smelling salt diffusers. "Please note that we've updated our response protocols. We now have 3 teams on standby." "You really didn't need." "The 3rd team is for when the first 2 teams faint." Zephyr pinched the bridge of their nose. "Right. Let's just get this over with. What's the target?" A massive titanium-reinforced block of the galaxy's strongest metal materialized in the testing range. Dr. Xylophone bounced excitedly, creating a sound like wind chimes in a hurricane. "Now please follow the 47-point safety checklist," he began. "First, ensure your personal force field is firing," Zephyr shouted, pulling the trigger. The resulting chaos was underwhelming. A beam of light, somehow managing to look apologetic, emerged from the weapon and gently caressed the metal block. There was a small ping sound, followed by what might have been a light breeze. Zephyr walked up to the target and squinted. Did this thing just leave a smudge? I think my finger could scratch deeper than this." "Impossible." Dr. Xylophone vibrated so intensely he nearly shattered. The energy readings were off the charts. The power output was equivalent to a supernova. "A supernova?" Zephyr raised an eyebrow. Doc, I've got a UV flashlight that hits harder than this. Look, they pulled out their keychain light. No, the entire observation deck screamed in unison. 3 scientists fainted preemptively. The human has an unauthorized weapon. Someone triggered the alarm system, which promptly began playing soothing meditation music, another recent addition after Zephyr had complained about the original klaxon being too quiet. It's just a flashlight, Zephyr protested as containment foam started spraying from the ceiling. The medical teams were already wheeling in extra fainting couches. Security Protocol 7B human is now in effect, the AI announced cheerfully. All personnel please assume the designated panic positions. We don't have designated panic positions, Commander Vrax clicked frantically. Yes, we do, the AI responded. Thanks to Mr. Kane's last weapons test, we now have 17 approved ways to faint safely. Zephyr watched as the room descended into its usual chaos, idly tossing the planet cracker from hand to hand. You know what this needs? If we just bypassed the safety limiters and added a small nuclear core. The sound of bodies hitting the floor was almost musical this time. I haven't even gotten to the fun part about quantum tunneling, Zephyr shouted over the meditation music and hiss of containment foam. Also, who changed my coffee to decaf? Because that's the real safety violation here. Commander Vrax, one of the few still conscious, clicked their mandibles weakly. Kane, perhaps we should discuss modifications after we revive the engineering team, and restock the smelling salts, and rebuild testing chamber 4. Again. Fine, Zephyr sighed, wiping containment foam off their testing suit. But I'm submitting my improvement proposals now, and this time I'm including diagrams. 3 more thuds echoed through the chamber. Make that 4 medical teams, Commander Vrax muttered into their communicator. And order more fainting couches. The reinforced ones. With cup holders. And proper coffee, Zephyr added. None of that decaf nonsense. How am I supposed to test weapons properly without caffeine? The AI updated its daily log. 9:15 planet cracker test failed to crack anything. 9:16 mass fainting incident 2847. 9:17 containment foam deployment 156. 9:18 human caffeine complaint 3492. 9:19 emergency fainting couch requisition 789. 9:20 beginning construction of medical team bunker 4. Just another morning in the galaxy's most heavily padded weapons testing facility. Today, Commander Vrax announced to the assembled Galactic Defense Council, we present our latest advancement in weapons technology, the Supernova Simulacrum. The massive testing chamber, specially reinforced for this demonstration, was packed with the galaxy's most important military leaders. Each had their own premium fainting couch now, with integrated gravity stabilizers and a personal medical team on standby. Zephyr stood in the testing area, examining what looked like a cross between a jellyfish and a disco ball mounted on a stick. Quick question, why is it playing smooth jazz? The harmonics help stabilize the quantum matrix, Dr. Xylophone explained proudly. Also, studies show it reduces fainting by 3.2%. Fascinating, Zephyr deadpanned. And the bubble wrap around the trigger. Safety requirement 2847B, a nervous-looking bureaucrat called out from behind their blast shield. All human-operated triggers must be cushioned to protect against your species. Enthusiastic handling. The weapon suddenly emitted a sound like a saxophone having an existential crisis. Oh, Dr. Xylophone chimed excitedly. It's charging. Everyone, please ensure your personal force fields are activated, your wills are updated, and your fainting couches are in the upright position. Zephyr watched as the assembled dignitaries went through what looked like an airline safety demonstration choreographed by an anxiety-riddled octopus. 3 species they didn't even recognize had already fainted preemptively. Firing in 3, Dr. Xylophone announced. Zephyr adjusted their stance. 2. The smooth jazz intensified. 1. Several more officials fainted. Initiating. The weapon released what could only be described as a disappointing light show, accompanied by what sounded like Kenny G having a mild disagreement with physics. Zephyr waited a full minute before speaking. Was that it? Incredible, shouted one official who clearly hadn't been watching. Unprecedented. But it didn't do anything, Zephyr pointed out. The simulation shows it released enough energy to collapse a star, Dr. Xylophone protested, pulling up holographic charts that looked suspiciously like modern art. Look, Zephyr sighed, setting down the weapon with perhaps a bit too much force, causing 3 more officials to faint. I've got some suggestions for improvements. The entire room gasped. Someone started preemptively distributing smelling salts. First, Zephyr continued, pulling out a tablet. If we just rerouted the power through a concentrated dark matter stream. Thud, 5 more unconscious officials. Then added a antimatter catalyst. Thud, thud, thud. And maybe spiced it up with a little quantum tunneling. The medical teams were now working in shifts. And here's the fun part: we could destabilize the core to create a temporary micro-universe which would then implode. Commander Vrax interrupted, possibly to prevent the complete unconsciousness of the entire Galactic Defense Council. Kane, perhaps we should take a break too. That's when everything went sideways. Literally. The harmless weapon, apparently objecting to being set down too hard, decided to activate its secondary systems. A beam of pure energy shot out, heading straight for the observation deck. Time seemed to slow down for Zephyr. Without thinking, they dove forward, grabbed the weapon, and in one smooth motion, redirected the beam toward the reinforced testing wall. The burst of adrenaline surging through their system connected somehow with the weapon's quantum matrix. The resulting explosion was substantial. When the dust settled and the smooth jazz finally stopped, Zephyr stood in the middle of what used to be testing chamber 1 through 7. The wall wasn't just breached, it had been utterly obliterated, offering a lovely view of the planet below. The silence was broken by one of the few conscious scientists monitoring the readings. Impossible. The energy output. It's over 1,000 times what we recorded in testing. What did you do? Zephyr shrugged, still riding the adrenaline high. I just got excited. You know how humans get when things explode. The medical teams, now working in triple shifts, were having trouble keeping up with the new wave of faintings. Dr. Xylophone, who had turned an interesting shade of translucent, was staring at his readings. The human's biochemistry, their adrenaline. It somehow amplified the weapon's power matrix. They're not just resistant to our weapons, they're catalysts. Does this mean I can finally remove the rubber ducky stickers? Zephyr asked hopefully. This changes everything, Commander Vrax declared to the few officials still conscious. Quick, someone take notes. We need to. 2. Thud. And there goes the commander. Zephyr sighed, casually stepping over the growing collection of unconscious bodies. Hey, since everyone's taking a nap, mind if I try a few more modifications? I've got this great idea involving quantum entanglement and maybe just a tiny artificial black hole. The remaining conscious beings fainted so quickly they set a new galactic record. The facility AI's voice crackled through the remaining speakers, update converting all remaining chambers to medical bays, also ordering more fainting couches, and replacing smooth jazz with heavy metal as per human adrenaline optimization protocols. Zephyr grinned, looking at the massive hole in the facility wall. Now that's more like it, though it could still be stronger. Somewhere in the distance, even the unconscious aliens shuddered. 1 week later. The Emergency Galactic Defense Council session was being held in the only room large enough to accommodate everyone's medical support teams and reinforced fainting couches, the cafeteria. After extensive analysis, Dr. Xylophone announced, his crystalline form still slightly trembling from the last week's events. We've come to a revolutionary conclusion: humans aren't fragile at all. They're walking weapons catalysts. Specifically, he continued, projecting a hologram that looked suspiciously like a human drinking coffee surrounded by explosions, their adrenaline is more potent than any power source we've developed. When combined with our technology, it creates, well, a very nice viewing window. Zephyr chimed in from their seat, gesturing to the massive hole still visible through 17 different testing chambers. We've developed new testing protocols, Commander Vrax announced, mandibles clicking nervously as they watched Zephyr casually sip from their restored full caffeine coffee supply. From now on, all weapons must pass the human excitement test if Kane isn't impressed. It's not ready. Finally, Zephyr perked up. Does this mean we can remove all these safety protocols? Because I've got some ideas about. The medical teams moved into position with practiced efficiency as the first wave of faintings began. Actually, Professor Photon flickered excitedly. We're developing new weapons specifically designed to harness human adrenaline. Our first prototype is ready for testing today. Zephyr's eyes lit up. Several officials preemptively lay down on their fainting couches. The prototype was wheeled in a sleek, almost predatory-looking device that hummed with barely contained energy. Gone were the rubber duckies and rainbow stickers, replaced with what appeared to be heavy metal band logos. We call it the Human Enthusiasm Quantum Harmonizer, Dr. Xylophone announced proudly, or HEQH for short. That's a terrible name, Zephyr commented, already reaching for it. Let's see what it does. Wait, Commander Vrax called out. The safety briefing. But Zephyr had already picked it up, their excitement connecting with the weapon's systems. The resulting light show made a supernova look like a birthday candle. When everyone's vision cleared, the cafeteria had acquired several new skylights, 3 nearby moons had slightly altered orbits, and the facility's AI was singing Metallica. Now that's what I am talking about, Zephyr shouted enthusiastically, while casually sipping their coffee with their free hand. Though maybe if we adjusted the quantum field oscillator. The medical teams had to break out their emergency smelling salts. New protocol update, the AI announced cheerfully over the sound of bodies hitting the floor. All weapons testing must now be conducted from orbit. Also reinforcing fainting couches with titanium alloy and stockpiling coffee. Lots of coffee. Commander Vrax, one of the few still conscious, watched as Zephyr excitedly sketched modifications on a tablet, occasionally pausing to take a sip of coffee or gesture at the new holes in reality. We've created a monster, they clicked weakly. Actually, Dr. Xylophone chimed in from his semi-transparent state of near unconsciousness. We've discovered that humans were the real super weapons all along. We just needed to add coffee and explosions. Speaking of which, Zephyr called out, who wants to see what happens when I try this with an espresso shot? The sound of mass fainting that followed set yet another galactic record. The facility AI made its final log entry of the day. Weapon test successful. Structural integrity at 23% and falling. Coffee supplies critical. Fainting couch durability upgrades required. New holes in space-time 7. Human excitement levels optimal. Current status now accepting applications for a 4th medical response team. Note, perhaps we should have stuck with the rubber duckies. Zephyr stood amid the chaos, weapon in one hand, coffee in the other, grinning maniacally. You know what would make this even better? The few conscious beings left all shouted in unison, no. Too late. I've already drawn up the plans. Now, about that artificial black hole idea. The universe itself seemed to shudder in anticipation. Just another day in the life of the galaxy's only human weapons tester, now with unlimited coffee privileges and a growing collection of holes in reality to call their own.